You have been lied to about your addiction. You have been taught that it is a powerful force, a complex disease, a battle you must fight for the rest of your life. This is the great deception. The truth is this: your addiction has no power of its own, for it is nothing but a shadow, a frantic cry from a sense of self that does not exist. The moment you stop struggling with the shadow on the wall and turn to face the light which casts it, the struggle is over. What you are about to hear will reveal why the entire premise of your battle is false, and how, in that revelation, you will find a freedom so simple and so complete it can only be called the end of the world as you know it. For you see, the entire world, and indeed your own mind, has been framed to perceive this shadow as a solid, formidable entity. You are told it is a monster residing within you, a chronic condition, a relentless compulsion that you must manage, resist, and wage war against for the remainder of your days. This is the foundational error, the primary misperception that guarantees a lifetime of conflict and inevitable failure. Consider this: if you walk into a room and see a coiled serpent on the floor, your entire being reacts with immediate terror. Your heart pounds, your breath catches, your body freezes. The substance of that fear, the very real physical and emotional reaction, is generated by the belief in the reality of the snake. But what happens when you flip the light switch? In an instant, the serpent is revealed to be nothing but a coiled rope. The fear vanishes not because you fought it, not because you analyzed its patterns or built up a resistance to it, but because the light of understanding revealed the truth of the object. The fear did not leave. It was simply revealed to have never had a valid cause in the first place. This is the precise nature of what you call addiction. It is the rope mistaken for a snake. The moment you believe the shadow is real, you endow it with a power it does not possess. You begin a dialogue with it. You argue with it. You plead with it. You try to make bargains with it. Just one more time. You say, or I will resist it tomorrow. This entire negotiation is conducted with a phantom. It is like being in a room where a film is projected on the wall and you begin to argue with the characters on the screen, trying to convince the villain not to be evil, trying to stop the narrative from unfolding. Your efforts are not merely futile. They are a form of madness, for you are granting reality to a series of shadows. The compulsion for that drink, that substance, that destructive behavior feels so visceral, so urgent, so physical. The craving screams with a voice that seems to originate from the very core of your being. But I tell you, that voice is an echo in an empty chamber. It is the frantic cry of a mirage, desperate to convince you of its substance, before it vanishes in the light of awareness. Let us take this from the abstract into the concrete reality of your daily life. You are driving home from work, and the thought arises, I need to stop and get a bottle. The thought carries with it a wave of sensation, a tightness in the chest, a nervous energy in the hands, a mental narrative that spins a tale of relief, of deserved reward, of necessary escape. The entire constellation of thought, sensation, and emotion presents itself as an unbreakable chain, a causal reality that seems to lead inevitably to the liquor store. You believe the power is in the bottle, in the substance, in the action. But the power is not there. The power you feel is the power you are, giving to the thought form. You are, in that moment, projecting the serpent onto the rope. You are believing the shadow on the wall is a real entity moving toward you. The transformational moment does not come from mustering a greater willpower to resist this chain. That is merely a different kind of struggle with the same shadow. Fighting a craving with willpower is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You may succeed for a time, using immense effort and tension, but the moment your grip slackens, the ball explodes back to the surface, often with even greater force. The answer is not in applying more force against the shadow. The answer is to turn on the light. The craving is not a command, it is a suggestion. It is not a truth, it is a thought. It has no more inherent power to control you than a cloud has the power to control the sky. The sky does not fight the cloud. It does not resist the cloud. It does not negotiate with the cloud. The sky simply is, and the cloud, having no substance of its own, eventually dissipates within the vastness that contains it. Your true nature is that sky, not the passing weather of cravings and fears. The moment you stop seeing the addiction as a powerful thing and begin to see it as a powerless appearance, the entire dynamic shifts. The struggle ceases not because you won, but because you saw there was no one to fight and nothing to fight against. The energy you once poured into battling the phantom is suddenly freed. You are no longer a slave reacting to a master, but an awake presence witnessing a thought. The compulsion may still arise, it may still knock at the door, but when you realize the one who is being called does not exist, the separate, needy, insufficient self that the craving calls to, the knocking finds no one to answer. It is in this profound and simple understanding that the illusion of power is broken, not through battle, but through the radiant, silent truth of what you are. This frantic cry, this entire negotiation with a phantom, originates from a source, and it is imperative that we trace it back to its root. We have established that the shadow has no substance, but from where does this compelling, convincing illusion arise? It springs from a false sense of self, a constructed identity that believes it is separate, incomplete, and perpetually in need of something from the outside world to make it whole, to make it safe, to make it feel real. This is the I that feels lonely, the I that feels anxious, the I that believes it is not enough. It is a mental image you have been carrying your entire life, a collection of stories, wounds, and desires that you have mistaken for your true identity. This self is not a solid entity. It is a vortex of constantly changing thoughts and feelings, and it lives in a state of perpetual lack. Because it feels empty, it is always hungry. Because it feels threatened, it is always seeking a fortress. Because it feels temporary, it is always grasping for something to give it a sense of permanence. Your addiction, in its most fundamental nature, is not a problem to be solved. It is a demand of this false self. It is the mechanism this illusory I has seized upon to try and fill its own perceived void. The drink, the drug, the gambling, the obsessive behavior, these are not the core issue. They are the prescribed, albeit destructive, solution that the separate self has devised for its own imagined predicament. It is a desperate attempt to quiet the knowing sense of incompleteness that is the very atmosphere this false self breathes. Think of a man who has a splinter in his finger. The pain is intense and localized. He may become obsessed with finding a comfortable position for his hand. He may take painkillers to numb the sensation. He may even blame the chair he was sitting in when it happened. All of these are attempts to address the pain without removing the splinter. The addiction is the painkiller. It is a temporary numbing of the profound discomfort of living as a separate, fragile self. It does not remove the cause. It merely masks the symptom, and in doing so, allows the wound to fester unseen. Let this become practical in your own experience. Consider the moment the urge arises. Before the thought of the substance itself, there is a subtle shift in your inner atmosphere. A feeling of restlessness creeps in during a quiet afternoon, a sense of boredom during a mundane task, a flush of social anxiety before a party, a wave of frustration after a difficult conversation. In that instant, the false self is activated. It feels this discomfort as a threat to its very existence. It cannot simply abide with the restlessness or sit with the anxiety, for to do so would be to feel its own insubstantial nature. So it immediately and frantically searches its memory for a solution. It remembers that a certain behavior, a certain substance, provided a temporary respite from this feeling of being a vulnerable I. The demand for the addiction is, therefore, the false self's prescription for its own salvation. It is the voice that says, I am bored, therefore I need excitement, or I am anxious, therefore I need to be calm, or I am lonely, therefore I need to feel connection. The therefore I need is the demand, and it feels like an unbreakable law of your universe. When you believe you are this separate self, this demand feels like your own deepest desire. You are convinced that fulfilling this need is synonymous with survival. But I tell you, it is the survival of a ghost. The moment you begin to question the reality of the one who is making the demand, the entire structure begins to tremble. Who is this I that is so bored? Who is this I that is so anxious? When you turn your attention from the object of the craving to the subject who craves, you are not engaging in a psychological analysis of your personal history. You are inquiring into the very nature of the one who seems to be speaking. You are looking for the source of the voice. Is it solid? Does it have a location? Can you find a permanent, unchanging entity called me that is making these demands? Or do you find only a stream of transient thoughts and sensations? This is not an intellectual exercise. It is the most practical thing you can do. In the very moment of the craving, Instead of following the thought to the bottle or the behavior, turn around and look back at the one who wants it. Do not fight it. Do not analyze it. Simply look. In that looking, in that pure, simple attention, a profound revelation may occur. You may find that the one who is demanding is itself a thought, a whisper in the vastness of your own awareness. And a whisper, no matter how urgent, cannot command an ocean. This act of looking back at the one who craves is the great turning point. It is the moment you cease being a participant in the shadow, play, and become the silent, aware witness of it. This is the profound shift from engaging with the shadow to turning towards the light. The shadow, as we have seen, is the false self and its endless, frantic demands. But what is this light? It is not a thing to be acquired or an object to be found. It is the very conscious awareness in which the false self and its dramas arise and subside. It is the capacity you have to be aware of the craving, to be aware of the anxiety, to be aware of the very thought, I am not enough. This awareness is not itself anxious, craving, or lacking. It is the silent, spacious, and unchanging background against which all the changing content of your life appears. You cannot fight a shadow, but you can illuminate it, and in the light, its apparent substance vanishes. This turning is not a physical action, but a radical reorientation of attention away from the objects of consciousness and towards consciousness itself. Most of your life has been spent looking at the world projected on the screen, completely captivated by the storyline, the heroes, and the villains. You have identified yourself as one of the characters in the drama, a character with a problem called addiction. The turning to the light is the moment you remember that you are not the character on the screen. You are the aware presence, watching the screen. The character may feel weak, but the watcher is not weak. The character may feel compelled, but the watcher is free. The character is part of the story, but the watcher is the space in which the story unfolds. This is not a metaphor. It is the fundamental truth of your experience. Before any thought, before any emotion, before any sensation, there is the simple, undeniable fact of awareness. This is your true identity, and it has never been, and can never be, addicted to anything. Let this become practical. You are sitting at home, and the familiar tug of the craving begins. The old narrative starts its broadcast, the description of the pleasure, the justification, the planning. In the past, your entire being would have been sucked into this vortex. Your attention would have become trapped within the story, and you would have felt like a leaf in a hurricane, powerless against the storm of your own thoughts. The turning to the light is a simple, yet revolutionary act. Instead of following the storyline, you gently, without force, bring your attention to the one who is hearing the broadcast. You feel the physical sensations of the craving not as a command to act, but as simple sensations appearing in the field of your awareness. You notice the thoughts not as truths, but as clouds passing through the sky of your mind. You are not trying to change them, stop them, or analyze them. You are simply acknowledging their presence while resting as the space that contains them. This is the critical difference between suppression and illumination. Suppression is when you try to push the shadow away, which only gives it power and ensures its return. Illumination is when you bring the light of your own aware presence to the shadow, which reveals its true, insubstantial nature. It is the difference between staring at a dark corner in a room and shining a flashlight into it. The darkness was never a substance, it was merely the absence of light. In the same way, the power of the craving is not a substance, it is the absence of the conscious recognition of what you are. When you shine the light of pure awareness on the craving, you are not fighting darkness with darkness. You are simply being what you are, and in that being, the illusion of a separate, commanding power is seen through. This is not a state of blankness or passivity. It is the most dynamic and alive state possible, for it is the state of your own being. The character in the movie may be running, fighting, or hiding, but the screen upon which it is projected remains still, clear, and unaffected. Your addicted persona is a frantic character in a personal drama, but the aware presence that you are is the silent screen, already whole, already free. The struggle for freedom takes place within the movie. Actual freedom is the realization that you were never trapped in the movie to begin with. You are the witnessing consciousness, and in that realization, the chains of the character, which seemed so solid, are revealed to be made of nothing more than a belief in a story, a shadow that could only exist when you were turned away from the light. This realization of yourself as the aware presence, the silent witness, is not the discovery of a new, more sophisticated identity. It is the falling away of all that you are not, revealing the profound and stunning simplicity of what remains. This is the simplicity of your spiritual identity. It is not complex, hidden, or difficult to attain. It is what you have always been, prior to the rise of the complicated story of a separate self with its labyrinth of problems and addictions. The entire struggle has been an attempt to fix a character in a movie, while all along, your freedom was in recognizing yourself as the screen, immaculate, unchanging, and utterly untouched by the dramas playing upon it. This true identity is not a state of achievement, but of humble, simple being. It requires no special knowledge, no arduous pilgrimage, no accumulation of virtue. It asks only for your recognition. It is the I am, before any other words are added. I am weak. I am strong. I am addicted. I am free. All these are later decorations hung upon the simple, undeniable fact of conscious being. The mind, conditioned by complexity, rebels against this simplicity. It insists that something so profound must be difficult, that liberation must be earned through immense effort and personal transformation. This very insistence is the voice of the false self, for its entire existence depends on a narrative of struggle, growth, and becoming. To admit that what you seek has always been here, shining in plain sight, is to render that entire project obsolete. The simplicity we speak of is like the air you breathe, You do not need to strive for it. You do not need to deserve it. You do not need to remember to take it in. It is your native element. Your addiction was a complicated, exhausting, and ultimately futile attempt to hold your breath, believing that the air was not available or that you were unworthy of it. The moment you stop holding your breath, the moment you relax the frantic effort, the air rushes in of its own accord. So it is with your true nature. The effort to be free is the very thing that obscures the freedom that is already present. Let this simplicity permeate the most challenging moments of your daily life. The phone rings with news that triggers anxiety. The old, complex machinery of the false self immediately whirs into action the racing heart, the catastrophic thoughts, the frantic search for a solution, the immediate, visceral demand for the old anesthetic, the drink, the drug, the distraction. This is the labyrinth. The simple recognition of your spiritual identity is the way out. It does not involve fighting the anxiety. It does not involve analyzing why you are anxious. It is the simple, direct turning of attention to the one who is aware of the anxiety. Where is this anxiety? It is felt as sensations in the body. And who is aware of these sensations? There is a knowing of them. This knowing is not itself anxious. It is spacious, clear, and impartial. It is the screen, and the anxiety is a dark, dramatic scene playing upon it. You are not asked to change the scene. You are only asked to remember what you are. In that simple remembering, a space opens up. The identification with the anxious character loosens. You are no longer trapped inside the panic. You are the aware presence in which the panic is arising. The compulsion to reach for the substance was the character's desperate solution. But when you are no longer exclusively identified as the character, the solution loses its urgency. The craving may still be present, but it is now like a knock at the door when you realize there is no one home to answer. It arises, it persists for a time, and it fades away without pulling you into its narrative. This is the great secret. The power of the addiction was never in the substance or the behavior, but in the energy of identification. You gave your own light, your own conscious being, to the shadowy figure of the addict, and then were terrified by the monster you had created. Withdraw the light of your identification, and the monster vanishes. It was never a real entity. It was only you, looking at yourself through a lens of fear and separation. The simplicity of your spiritual identity is that it is already whole, already complete, already free. It does not need to be healed, for it was never broken. It does not need to be filled, for it is already overflowing. The entire complex structure of your addiction was built upon the single, erroneous belief that you were a separate self. The moment that belief is seen through, not by force, but by gentle, persistent recognition, the structure, having no foundation, collapses of its own weight. And what remains is not a new, improved person, but the simple, eternal, and undeniable fact of being itself, which was there all along, waiting patiently behind the noise. This collapse is not a violent overthrow, but a quiet cessation. It is the end of a struggle that you simply cease to fuel. This is the true meaning of surrender. It has been terribly misunderstood, often mistaken for a state of defeat or resignation, a white flag raised to a more powerful enemy. But I speak of a surrender that is the ultimate victory, for it is the surrender not to the addiction, but of the very one who was fighting it. It is the falling away of the commander who was directing the war. When you realize that the separate self, the I, that feels weak and tempted, is itself the core of the problem, the only logical conclusion is to lay down its arms. You are not surrendering to the craving. You are surrendering the one who craves. You are not giving up the fight against the shadow. You are finally admitting that the one holding the sword is also made of shadow. This is not a passive act, but the most active and intelligent step you can take. It is the active relinquishment of a false identity and all its futile strategies. True surrender is the conscious decision to stop the internal dialogue. It is to stop arguing with the craving, stop justifying it, stop analyzing its origins, and stop trying to resist it with a willpower that you have already discovered is finite and unreliable. It is to drop the entire project of self-management. The mind will scream that this is dangerous, that without its constant vigilance and control, you will be swept away. This is the final bluff of the false self, the last card it plays to maintain its position of authority. But when you call this bluff, when you consciously decide to stop the mental battle, you do not fall into chaos. Instead, you fall into the vast, peaceful space of your own awareness that was always there beneath the turmoil. You are not surrendering to the addiction. You are surrendering to the truth of what you are. You are letting the character in the movie dissolve back into the screen. The screen does not struggle to hold the image. It effortlessly allows it to appear and disappear. Bring this into the raw moments of your experience. The urge arrives, a familiar, tightening knot in the stomach, a whispering voice that says, "Now." The old pattern is to tense up, to summon your resources, to think, "No, I will not give in. I am stronger than this. This is the war." It is you, as the fragile I, trying to stand against a tidal wave. Surrender looks entirely different. It does not tense. It does not prepare for battle. Instead, it simply opens. It feels the knot in the stomach fully, without any agenda to make it go away. It hears the whispering voice and acknowledges its presence without following its command. It is a profound and total letting go of the need to control the outcome. It is saying, inwardly, "I will not fight this feeling. I will not run from it. I will simply be here as the awareness in which this is happening." In that moment, you are no longer a person fighting a craving. You are awareness hosting a sensation and a series of thoughts. The personal stake in the outcome vanishes. Whether the craving stays or goes is no longer the central drama. The central fact is your being, your presence, which remains unchanged. This is the secret that breaks the cycle. The addiction thrived on resistance. The energy you poured into fighting the shadow was the very energy that gave it life. When you surrender, you withdraw that energy. It is like a fire that you stop feeding. The logs may still smolder for a time, but without new fuel, the flames will die. The craving, when met with open, silent, non-resistant awareness, is like a wave that rises up, peaks, and then must naturally subside back into the ocean. It has nowhere else to go. It finds no opponent to engage with, no story to attach to, no one to command. It is seen for what it always was, a temporary constellation of energy appearing in the infinite space of you. This is not a technique to make the craving disappear, though that will be its eventual outcome. It is a fundamental shift in your relationship to all experience. You are no longer a slave reacting to a master, but the open space of freedom itself, allowing all things to come and go. The struggle ends not with a bang, but with a whisper, the quiet, effortless whisper of surrender, which is the sound of the false self returning to the silence from which it came. This open space of freedom is not a temporary state you visit, but a permanent ground of being in which you can learn to abide. Abiding is not an act of will or a state of intense concentration. It is a gentle, continuous remembering of what you have discovered yourself to be. It is the natural, effortless rest of consciousness in its own source, like a wave settling back into the ocean and realizing it has never been separate from the vastness. The frantic search is over. The struggle has ceased. What remains is not a void, but a profound and living silence, a fullness that is your native state. This is the final understanding that you are not a visitor to this peace, you are its very substance. The separate I was a temporary contraction, a forgetting, and in remembering, you simply return home to what has always been true. Abiding is the practical application of this truth in every moment of the day. It is not a meditation you do for 20 minutes, but a perspective you wear as your very eyes. You walk to your car, and you are aware of the feeling of your feet on the ground, the coolness of the air, the sound of distant traffic. In the past, this simple experience would have been a backdrop for the internal monologue of the separate self, its worries, its plans, its regrets. Now, it can be something else entirely. It can be the awareness of awareness itself, noticing these sensations without being captured by them. You are not trying to stop the thoughts. You are simply no longer mistaking them for the center of your universe. The thought arises, I have so much to do, and instead of that thought triggering a cascade of anxiety and the old urge to escape, it simply arises and passes like a bird crossing the sky. You abide as the sky, not the bird. This is how the illusion of a returning addiction is dismantled. The old fear was, what if the craving comes back with such force that I am overpowered? But from the place of abiding, that question loses its meaning. A craving may indeed arise. It may knock loudly and insistently. But when you are abiding in the recognition of your true nature, the craving is not happening now to you. It is happening within you. There is a world of difference. The personal, vulnerable, you that could be overpowered is seen as the illusion it is. The craving is just another weather pattern in the climate of your experience. You do not need to stop the rain. You only need to be the space in which the rain falls. The rain does not threaten the space. The storm does not harm the sky. In this abiding, you realize that the power you once attributed to the addiction was your own power, misplaced and projected onto a phantom. You are now reclaiming it, not through battle, but through the quiet, unwavering fact of your own being. Let this be your new normal. You are in a conversation, and someone says something that once would have triggered a deep insecurity and a subsequent craving. You feel the old vibration begin, the tightening in the chest, the flush of heat. This is the critical moment. This is not a moment for fighting, but for abiding. Feel the sensation fully. Do not name it fear or anger. Do not tell a story about it. Simply be the aware space for the raw sensation. Notice how it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It is a process, not a person. It is content, not the container. As you abide as the container, a profound stability emerges. The storm of emotion, denied the fuel of your identification, expends its energy and dissipates. The urge to flee into the old behavior arises, and finding no one to command, simply passes on by. This is not a life of numbness, but one of incredible aliveness. You feel everything more deeply, but you are no longer any of it. You are the silent, unmoved witness, the conscious presence that was there before the addiction, was there during the addiction, and remains serene and whole now that the shadow has been seen through. This abiding presence is the permanent source, the I am that has no opposite and knows no lack, and in its quiet embrace, the world and all its passing phenomena are finally met with a freedom that cannot be shaken.